How do you usually do interviews when you find your corporate lawyer job? Like, I'm very curious about that.
So I'm sorry, I'm just looking at how do I usually do interviews and working, managing both? I don't have children, and I'm not very good at 8 hours of sleep. So is the question, how do I find the time, or is the question, how do I physically do it without hearing?
How do you physically do it?
So a couple of ways. One, I have a lot of accommodations, so being able to have sound amplification devices, being able to have captions. Oddly, switching to Zoom was a huge help because I can read lips. It's much better than conference calls. But there are definitely spaces that are challenging for me to hear. And honestly, I probably would have become a litigator but I knew I couldn't navigate the courtroom because I wouldn't have been able to hear if I wasn't wearing hearing aids and not asking for accommodation. But yeah, so it's a both and. It's asking for accommodations, but then at times I still have my own growing edges of finding, ways speaking up and having to educate. A lot of times I'm the only one in the room with a disability, so I really take it as an opportunity to in part meet my own needs, but really serve as a representative and an example. And invariably, after I announce my disability and ask for an accommodation, people will come to me privately, always, and share that, I have a disability. Thank you so much for doing that. Now I feel more permission. So I try to use my accommodation request as a permissioning for everyone, whether it's you have a disability or maybe you just have a different working arrangement, or you need to work in a different way, that all of those are allowed and permissioned. Thanks.
Hi, hi, my name is Daniel. I just wanted to know how the past few years with everybody wearing masks has affected your daily accessibility.
So thank you. That's a wonderful question. So the question is, how has it been the last couple of years wearing a mask? So it's been extremely, extremely challenging in that obviously if you lip read, it's really difficult to be able to hear. There are clear masks, but they're not as common or as widely used as regular. So what's been interesting though, as with everything, when you have these inflection points where there's usually the most strife or challenge, that's also usually the time where the most awareness becomes apparent. I mean, we've seen this in our political system and recently. So I try to hold that while, yes, many people with hearing loss really struggled during the pandemic, and even in medical environments, which is frustrating because that's not a space where you think there would be more sensitivity, but it's hard. But at the same time, so much awareness has been raised as a result of this that I'm just grateful. And also, I think a lot of people who maybe didn't realize they had hearing loss suddenly found they couldn't understand anything with a mask. And so it was a way where people, I think, became much more aware of their own physical reality. So they might not have identified as deaf or hard of hearing before the pandemic. And also during the pandemic, many people who got COVID had related hearing loss as well. So yeah, it's been challenging, but also a wonderful opportunity for education.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for sharing.
Hi.
My name is Zizi. My question is, for me, a lot of my own anxiety comes from when I'm speaking with people, picking up on social cues, trying to read them and questioning whether it's accurate or not. And it sounds like you have a lifelong honed skill. But I'm wondering, how do you kind of confirm or learn to trust your instinct or so strongly?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. So the question is, how have I learned to trust my instinct when navigating social situations where you're trying to essentially piece together incomplete information? And I love your question because it bridges it, not just people with hearing loss who do that. I'm also extremely shy and introverted. And so even if I didn't have a hearing loss, I still feel like I would be in a social situation and, not be the cool girl by any means, and not, quite maybe get all the social cues. It's a practice. So for a long time, I feel like I just developed a false exterior. I probably missed a lot, and I was probably misinterpreted. Either people thinking I'm aloof, or that I'm not smart, I didn't understand. But how I began to get that confidence is twofold. One is really just a sense of acceptance of it is just this. Having a hearing loss is going to mean I'm not going to hear everything. So that when that happens, it's not something that's triggering or that I'm resisting or that I'm upset about. It just is. It's just a part of my experience. So when it happens, I can just say, here we are, not hearing. This is part of who I am. And then at that point, I have a choice to, either say something or not. And everyone has to make their own choice as to whether you feel safe doing that. So part of it is having my own sense of self-acceptance. But the other part of it is really just being proactive. So if I make sure that whatever situation I'm going into, and I still don't always get it right, I make sure that I tell people that I have, because then it's a lot less of a big deal. And it's less interruptive in the sense of if people know, then they can either set up the conversation or the room in a way that's probably going to best support me. And then there are times where, it's just really hard. And that's where you draw on the comfort of, loving relationships, where you're just loved unconditionally, and that doesn't have to be with people. It can be with places, with animals, a therapeutic relationship, whatever that looks like. That can be, in a traditional therapy setting or in a religious setting, whatever, a mentor setting. And just finding those resources to be able to just help you hold that hardness, because sometimes it is just hard and frustrating, or awkward and embarrassing. I've definitely answered the wrong question many, many times. So.
Okay, one more question.
Hi.
I had a question about music. Do you enjoy listening to music? And if so, what frustrates you, or what have you had to relearn when using hearing aids, and specifically now cochlear implants?
Yeah, wonderful question. Thank you. So the question is around music. How do I enjoy it? Do I have challenges listening to it? So I am fortunate. I love music, but I definitely was the one singing the wrong lyrics my entire childhood. And it's funny now that, of course, you can look up lyrics and they're on Spotify. I'm like, oh God, that's what that song was. I had no idea what I was saying. So when I was younger, I loved it, but I would sort of mumble. I would, how all the little kids, they would go roller skating and they sing the song. I could never really do that because I never understood the words. So liner notes were my friend. And then as I got older, though, there are just so many ways that you can have the lyrics, and then I can actually understand it. I'm very lucky. When you get a cochlear implant, one of the things that can be affected is your ability to listen to music. It comes through either tinny or distorted, and I didn't have that experience. So I'm able to stream music directly from my phone to my cochlear implant to my hearing aid, and it's amazing. So it's something that's always been another language for me that I could take solace in, because it was a one-way exchange. And I think had I not had hearing loss, I probably would have played an instrument. But it was really hard. I was growing up in a tiny town in Minnesota. There was no way for me to find a teacher that could teach a deaf girl how to play an instrument. Oh, thank you so much, all of you. Yes. Oh, thank you.